menginap di kampus Gombak. PPE yang dihasilkan akan dihantar ke Pusat Perubatan UIAM di Kuantan Pahang dan lain-lain hospital yang akan dikenalpasti oleh Malaysian Relief Agency MRA.
Sementara itu, Universiti Islam Antarabangsa Malaysia UIAM mencatat sejarah sebagai institusi pengajian tinggi pertama di negara ini tersenarai sebagai finalis untuk 2 penganugerahan lestari antarabangsa. 2 anugerah itu adalah anugerah Green Gown Antarabangsa dalam kategori institusi lestari terbaik dunia dan anugerah memanfaatkan masyarakat menerusi program Light.
Change the stereotype image of Islam and Muslims in the world.
Anugerah ini merupakan pengiktirafan bagi universiti untuk membuat satu perubahan atas kepakaran yang telah diiktiraf oleh bangsa-bangsa bersatu dalam hal ini.
Kit yang kami hasilkan atau kit kami ialah kit pantas atau dipanggil rapid test kit menggunakan teknologi iaitu nanoteknologi.
Thank you once again, and I look forward to working with you closely for the year 21, 22 and beyond. and I hope we can come together in a more cohesive way after this, when we start looking at the roadmap 2021 to 2022, and also taking other initiatives like the Sejahtera Academic Framework and other things that will come by as we move forward in trying to understand what the future will be like. In the last 2 years, we have been trying to manage to change the university into a university that is truly international and sustainable. In this way, we are able to move as much as possible nature of education for the future by changing not only the structure of the university, but also the knowledge base as far as the university is concerned. In other words, IIUM is moving into a whole institutional transformation, taking with it the national education philosophy, sustainable development goals, United Nations 4 pillars of learning, and other very important foundation as far as the university is concerned.
Among the things we do to transform IUM as a sustainability institution was to rename some of the offices and centers to suit their functions to promote sustainability agendas such as responsible research, student development, community engagement, and knowledge for change. We also introduced holacratic leadership and management, where everyone in the campus is empowered and entrusted to carry out their sustainability initiatives.
Within a year, the impact of 29 flagship projects created could clearly be seen in 5 areas. First, the breaking down of academic administrative silos in a transformational way. 2, the building of voluntary teams and teamwork across the academic structure based on shared aspirations. 3, allowing for greater creativity and social innovation in translating SDGs into local context. 4, enhancing community engagement in co-problem solving based on SDG. And lastly, capturing data and information to be transformed into knowledge and wisdom.
The formal classroom education is now linked to our co-curricular activities, which give more meanings to our community engagement projects. Through learning to know, learning to do, learning to be, learning to live together, and learning to become.
I hope you have been able to see the gist of transformation that we are trying to do for the last 24 months, using the whole institutional transformation and also carving a new idea of what a human university is all about as a kind of novelty for the future.
We are a place of accomplishments. From humble beginnings, we have broken barriers and records. From the rawness of basic knowledge, we have instilled values. Values that inculcate the blossoming of minds and the bestowing of virtue. Our accomplishments have touched the lives of so many. For indeed, our infusing of virtue with knowledge has been the key to our success. Why are we always striving? Why do we keep pushing the boundaries? Why do we constantly try to bring out the best in each of us? Because here, no matter where you're from, you are accorded the same right to succeed.
Alright. Alhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Praise belongs to Allah. Blessings and peace be upon the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his family and companions. Yang berhormat Datuk Seri Dr. Noraini Ahmad, Minister of Higher Education Malaysia, His Excellency Mr. Nadiem Anwar Makarim, Minister of Education, Culture, Research and Technology, Republic of Indonesia, Professor Emeritus Tan Sri Datuk Zulkifli Abdul Razak, Rector International Islamic University Malaysia, distinguished speakers, invited guests, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and a very good morning. It is with great pleasure that I welcome each and every one of you to the international webinar on Humanizing Leadership, jointly organized by the International Islamic University Malaysia and the Higher Education Leadership Academy, better known as AKEPT. We will begin today's webinar with the Malaysian National Anthem, Negaraku, followed by the IIUM song, Leading the Way.
Share the wisdom to to the spirit of Islam. Revelation and reason, we shall excel, we shall prevail. Merging faith and knowledge, we, the Khalifa, we will fulfill the Amanah. Together we make the world a better place. Forever expand the culture of Iqra. IUM is to realize the meaning of Rahmatan lil Alamin. Together we make the world a better place. Forever expand the culture of Iqra. IUM is to realize the meaning of mercy to all worlds, for all mankind.
To invoke the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, allow me to invite Ustad Muhammad Ramadan Subki Abdullah, Islamic Religious Officer at IIUM Sultan Haji Ahmad Shah Mosque, to recite the dua.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين اللهم إنا نسألك رضاك والجنة ونعوذ بك من سخطك والنار اللهم إنك عفو كريم تحب العفو فاعف عنا وعن والدينا وعن جميع المسلمين والمسلمات والمؤمنين والمؤمنات برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. Merciful Allah, all praise is due to you. In your possession is all the creations. In your hands lie all the governments. We beseech you, begging for forgiveness and blessings in all of our action and deeds. Ya Allah, we pray to you, our Lord, to always bless and protect your servant and our King, ke bawah duli yang maha mulia, Seri Paduka Baginda yang di-Pertuan Agong, Al-Sultan Abdullah Riayatuddin Al-Mustafa Billah Shah, Ibni Al-Marhum Sultan Haji Ahmad Shah Al-Musta'in Billah. Our Queen, ke bawah duli yang maha mulia, Seri Paduka Baginda Raja Permaisuri Agong, Tunku Hajjah Azizah Aminah Maimunah Iskandariyah, binti Al-Marhum Al-Mutawakkil ala Allah Sultan Iskandar Al-Hajj, with all their princes and princesses, all their royal family members, and all the people of this nation, that they would always be in continuous faith, obedience, guidance, and in good health. O Allah, the most merciful, the most compassionate, bless all of us today in this webinar. Make it a stage for further prosperity and progress, and be of great benefit and contribution to the development of our people in Malaysia and the whole of the Ummah. O Allah, we plead that you shower tawfiq upon us, for us to continue to do good deeds that receive your pleasure, and a harmonious life that you bless. Allahumma ja'al jam'ana hadha jam'an marhuma, wa tafarruqana min ba'dihi tafarruqan ma'suma, wa la taj'al fina shaqiyan wa la matruda wa la mahruma. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين تقبل الله منكم.
Amin ya Rabbal Alameen. Thank you, Ustad Muhammad Ramadan Subki. I now invite Professor Emeritus Tan Sri Datuk Zulkifli Abdul Razak, Director of IIUM, to deliver his welcoming remarks.
Thank you, Dr. Adli. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin wassalatu wassalamu asyrafil anbiya mursalin Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. La haula wa la quwata illa billah. Yang berhormat Datuk Sri Dr. Nurani Ahmad, Minister of Higher Education Malaysia, Honorable Pak Nadim Anwar Makarim, Education Minister of Education, Culture, Research and Technology of Indonesia, participant, keynote speakers, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters. Let me first of all extend thanks to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala for giving us this opportunity to meet on a very important gathering discussing about leadership, in particular humanizing leadership. For this, I also like to thank AKEPT for giving IUM the confidence and also the conviction in trying to run this webinar together with AKEPT, and also trying to gather as many people as possible under this banner of how we could actually move the agenda of education forward by creating the kind of leadership that we all need for the pandemic and even beyond. This is a subject I think that has been dwelled a lot in my university, the International Association of University. When we look around and see what sort of leadership do we need, not only post-pandemic, even long before post-pandemic, looking at the kind of world that we are creating for ourselves. I think for the last decade or so, the world has never been a peaceful one, particularly involving Muslim Ummah and also the developing countries in general. All of us, I think, would agree that we are now somehow at the tipping point of where we're going to hit as far as this world is concerned. If 60% or more of the population are not settled in the way they are supposed to be treated as human beings, with dignity and also with the humanitarian values that all of us believe it is important for everybody to share and also to care. And this is the reason why we've started to ask ourselves whether the leadership model now that has been used around the world is sufficient to take us beyond this pandemic that we are talking about. And therefore, the word humanizing education comes to mind. This university, I think in the last 2 years, has prepared itself with our own sort of a module of what we call Sejahtera Academic Framework that links on humanizing education. In other words, the education that we want to bring to our students and beyond is how to be a better human being first before than anything else. We understand there's importance to be professionals and also earning good livelihood, but that would probably be a second agenda for us until and unless we can create a better human being, then better professionals will be something which is very dicey. And having good livelihood will not be even guarantee us to move forward until we know who we are as a human being. And it's the course of this discussion, while we think this is important and trying to make amends and changes in our curriculum structure, we are also looking at what sort of leadership do we need to make this possible, to make this happen, at least at our institution, if not beyond. And hence the word humanizing education comes into mind. You just listen to the song of IUM that talks about 4 things which is key in this humanizing education. One, for us to act as Khalifa, the vicegerent of God. In other words, everything is within our stewardship, that we need to look after them the way it is created and to benefit from it, not only from us, but for everybody around the world. And hence the word amanah becomes important, the second keyword as far as this is concerned. Amanah means we need to hold true to the principle that we believe that truth is the most important so that justice could be delivered. And where do we get justice from, if not from the knowledge that we actually promote through revelation and combination with reasons. Not only reason, revelation knowledge is also important. Being an Islamic university, this is one of the preoccupation that we want to have. How do we integrate knowledge, not only within revelation, but also reason, not only within science, but also arts, not only within dominant, but also indigenous knowledge. All this need to be unified into one single Tawhidic knowledge that we begin to understand where we are as far as the human being is concerned. And the third, of course, it is based on what we call the knowledge structure itself, which is AKEPT. AKEPT is not just about learning, it's not just about reciting, it's not just about memorizing, but also about reflecting and converting it into reality. How do we do this? As leaders, how do you actually make this happen on the ground so that our students really learn in translating knowledge into reality? And it's all for the last, which is rahmatan lil alamin, mercy to all. It doesn't matter whether you're a Muslim or a non-Muslim. It doesn't matter whether you're a human being or non-human. Anything that is created by God deserves to be in this place. And that is part and parcel of our responsibility as a human leadership to provide for all this. And therefore, this word humanizing leadership is a big agenda for us. And we want to share this with you. And that's why we are inviting very distinguished speakers to also have some of insights from your point of view so that we can put this together so that this can be a platform for us to act together in unison, especially when we are inundated with COVID-19. COVID-19 will look at how unified the human species are before they can, before we can break the chain of this infection by the coronavirus. If we are not able to do that, we will suffer a lot more as we go along, as this virus mutates from one variant to another, and we are put in a very difficult position to respond to their natural sort of way of fighting the the defense that we are trying to build against this. And therefore, there's no other choice as far as we can see. How do we unify ourselves? By making leadership as the core factor that people will unite around the world and make another human chain against the coronavirus chain. If this is not going to happen, then all of us will act separately in segmentations, and we'll find that this will be the breakdown, not only of human life, but human civilization at the end of the day. There's a huge price to be paid if we are not mindful of where we are heading together. And hence, this seminar to me is a very crucial seminar that allows us to think out loud, that allows us to think beyond what we know, that allows us to think beyond the paradigm of leadership that is very, very confined to certain structure, to certain ideology, or perhaps to certain framework. We want to move away. We want to say, how can this framework be unified so that people can identify, no matter who you are, whatever color, whatever religion, whatever creed. Because we are a human being, that's a platform that we want to work together. That's the only factor that binds us together. And if we cannot identify this among ourselves, then I think we'll be put in a very vulnerable state. So brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, that is the crux of the agenda of this webinar. We hope humanizing education, humanizing leadership will be better understood, will be the next platform for us to discuss across the board, will be our solution away from the pandemic and other pandemics that's to come, as predicted by many people beyond just COVID-19. So on that note, I would like to welcome you once again. I would like to thank my team for taking time and making this a successful seminar, and also our co-partners, AKEPT, who is very trusting and very confident in working together with us. And we hope the resolution from this webinar will be something that we can carry forward, not only for Malaysia, but also from neighboring countries, ASEAN, now that Pak Nadim is here with us, maybe with Indonesia. And I know Indonesia has also got another awesome plan ahead on education. How can we join forces and learn from one another and eventually bring it to the world that comes from our part of the world to support other agendas across the world? So let me wish you all the best. Let me wish you a fruitful sort of discussion, a very constructive one. At the end of the day, let's hope that at least among us, we have got an understanding of where we need to go and that pursue those journey to the end so that human being can be safe and human life could also be spared the way it should be as far as dignified human being is concerned. So on that note, wabillahi taufiq wa hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tan Sri, for reminding us of the utmost need to first and foremost nurture better human beings, and that higher education institutions can play this role through humanizing education and humanizing leadership. Over the next 1.5 days, this webinar, which has been divided into 5 primary sessions, will address a range of issues. In the first session, Professor Dr. Muhammad Aslam Muhammad Hanif will have the honor to engage in a conversation on transformative leadership facing uncertain future with His Excellency Mr. Nadiem Anwar Makarim, Minister of Education, Culture, Research and Technology, Republic of Indonesia. In the second session at 11 a.m., Associate Professor Dr. Faizah Idrus will moderate a forum on sustainability and inclusivity. The speakers at this forum are Professor Emeritus Tan Sri Datuk Zulkifli Abdul Razak, Director of IIUM, Dr. Fah Kim Beng, CEO and Founder, Strategic Plan Indo-Pacific Arena, and Dr. John Yip, Senior Investment Banker, BMG Financial Group of Saudi Arabia. At 2 p.m. this afternoon, the third session presents a forum on leadership and cultural intelligence, or CQ, which will feature 3 diverse speakers: Professor Dr. Abdul Aziz Barroot, Dean of International Institute of Islamic Thought and Civilization, ISTAC, Mr. Azif Mustafa, Head of Culture, Transformation and Employee Engagement, Celcom Axiata Berhad, and Imam Faisal Abdul Rauf, President of Cordoba Foundation, New York, United States of America. This forum will be moderated by Professor Dr. Shukran Abdul Rahman. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., Professor Dr. Haslinda Abdullah will moderate a forum on leadership in post-pandemic, the role of women, featuring 3 Iron Ladies: Professor Dr. Asma Ismail, Ibnu Sina Chairholder at IIUM, Professor Dr. Nur Inayah Yaakob, President and Vice Chancellor of Infrastructure University Kuala Lumpur, and Yang Berhormat Senator Datuk Ras Adi Barazi, Member of the Dewan Negara. The last session tomorrow at 10:45 a.m. is a forum moderated by Associate Professor Dr. Jesni Shamsul Saari, Professor Emeritus Dr. Muhammad Tahir Muhammad Azhar, IIUM Ombudsman, Professor Dr. Rashila Ramli, Principal Fellow at the Institute of Malaysian and International Studies, IKMAS, Universiti Kebangsaan Malaysia, and Dr. Hariyati Shahrina Abdul Majid, former EXCO member of Mercy Malaysia, will be discussing about leadership and Sejahtera Society. We will now proceed with a short multimedia presentation.
So for the new roadmap framework, we started off with 4 circles of domains, which we then overlay between one another. And then we say for everything to work, we must have a base or an ecosystem that support the things that we want to do. So we added another circle underneath. And finally, when we are done with the framework, it looks like this. The framework is made up of overlapping domains or circles, resulting in several petals or quadrants. As the domains overlap, the shade of the color becomes darker.
After a year of its implementation, the students have produced more than 300 projects proposals addressing various issues of sustainability inside and outside of the campus.
the students have published more than 20 newspaper articles sharing their ideas on sustainability challenge in the country and hundreds of blogs and individual journals to reflect their learning experiences.
Brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, Professor Dr. Hussaini Omar, the Director General of Higher Education, was supposed to deliver a speech on behalf of Yang Berhormat Datuk Seri Dr. Noraini Ahmad, the Minister of Higher Education. However, due to more pressing matters which he has to attend to, unfortunately, he is unable to join us. So we will proceed to the next session. But before that, allow me to introduce the moderator of that session, who is Professor Dr. Muhammad Aslam Muhammad Hanif. The Professor Dr. Muhammad Aslam Muhammad Hanif is a professor at the Department of Economics, Kuliah of Economics and Management Sciences, International Islamic University, Malaysia. He teaches economics and Islamic economics at both undergraduate and postgraduate levels, and has researched and published extensively in the areas of economics and development studies. His current research focus includes the role of Islam and religion in development and Islamic social finance. I now pass the baton to Prof. Muhammad Aslam Muhammad Hanif to conduct the next session. Brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, we are also waiting for the team of His Excellency, Mr. Nadim Anwar Makarim, to join us shortly, and then we will begin the fireside conversation, inshallah. But perhaps Professor Aslam would like to deliver a few opening remarks, perhaps. Prof. Aslam.
Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Dr. Adli, Tan Sri Zul, colleagues from the Ministry, from AKEPT, fellow panelists, speakers, and moderators. Once again, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera and a very good morning to everyone. Welcome to this international webinar on humanizing leadership. I think the introductory comments were made by Tan Sri Rector, talking about why it's very important to talk about the purpose of education, and I cannot agree with him more that central to what education is all about is producing good human beings. And that should come before producing manpower or good citizens, or you need to produce good people. And I think this is where leadership of universities and leadership of the education sector is very, very important, especially in these very trying times. We are still waiting for our keynote speaker. I'm wondering whether I should actually spend a few minutes to talk about him, and hopefully he will join us in 5 or 10 minutes. For those of you who maybe are not aware of who our keynote speaker is, it was supposed to be a keynote address, but I think the nature of the speaker, he made a request that he would prefer to have an interactive session rather than give a one-way presentation. And I think that speaks a lot for the man. And I could just maybe give a brief intro to him by saying that he's not a regular politician or a minister, somebody who comes in through the ranks of the party machinery and so on. But he was brought into the Indonesian cabinet in April 2019 to be part of what is termed Cabinet Indonesia Maju. Yeah, this is an effort by the current president of Republic of Indonesia, to have a very forward-looking agenda for the country, for the nation. And our Honourable Minister, Nadiem Anwar Makarim, became a minister in his mid-30s. I think, again, something very, very interesting for us to keep in mind. Somebody that we would consider to be a very young person, given the responsibility of becoming Minister of Education and Culture, which was basically the equivalent of our Malaysian Ministry of Education that deals with primary and school education before the university, or maybe including the matriculation. But the interesting thing about our speaker this morning is that he joined the government when he was already an experienced corporate leader and entrepreneur. So again, another very interesting aspect of our speaker this morning. And in many aspects, Pak Nadiem is really, in a way, an embodiment of the topic that we are talking about this morning. The title of the very, very sensitive computer panels. Okay. He, in many ways, is an embodiment of the topic of our webinar, and in this session, transformative leadership facing an uncertain future. Leadership is what the Honourable Minister is given and entrusted with through the education system that targets to change values and attitudes. I think something that Tan Sri Zul was mentioning about the importance of values and attitudes and human beings. And these change in values and attitudes are supposed to transform institutions and then society at large, right? And this transformation produces a new generation of people, that that will be able to steer the country, in the case of Indonesia, forward. A transformation that promotes sustainability. From the little experience that I've had dealing with colleagues from Indonesia, the Sustainable Development Agenda is also an important agenda in Indonesia, and therefore I think this idea of sustainability is also a very important part of that transformation. And all of this is happening at a very complex and uncertain time. And I think this is what makes the task of leadership very, very challenging. Our speaker this morning has got the ingredients of what it needs to undertake this leadership. Firstly,
Aslam, we are told that the minister is ready, Pak Nadiem.
Ah, okay. Is he already with us?
Yeah, I mean, according to Zurina.
Hi, Dr. Muhammad. How are
All
you?
right. Assalamualaikum, Pak Nadim. Thank you for joining us.
Salam. I'm sorry, I was already in the webinar, but I got the link for participants, so I was just hearing you speak.
Oh, okay.
So
I'm wondering whether we coordinated our batik this morning. We have
maybe
almost.
we did.
I was just introducing you, and giving a little bit about the background, some unique features that I think maybe we in Malaysia, are not used to. A very young leader of the Ministry of Education, who was brought in as part of this cabinet Indonesia Maju in 2019. Initially Ministry of Education, but now Ministry of Education, Culture, Education, Culture, Research and Technology. I think in Malaysia this would probably involve maybe three, if not four ministries coming under you. And so I was just mentioning that, probably you in many aspects you represent an embodiment of the topic that we are talking about. As far as education goes, I think you had the good fortune of a very solid education, international curriculum in Jakarta, later on in Singapore, undergraduate at Brown University, a very reputable university in the US. You did international relations, and then went on to Harvard to do an MBA. And I can tell everybody here that as soon as the MBA was achieved, our honorable speaker joined McKinsey, probably one of the major consulting firms globally. And I consider that to be maybe the phase of our speaker's learning and adapting phase. I'm sure the experience must have been incredible. But after 3 years, he decided to leave and to actually co-found Zalora Indonesia, where I think this I would like to term as a phase where you started to implement some of that knowledge that you may have received earlier, implementing and learning from experience. This I think is a very important part. And then you innovated as well by establishing Kartuku or My Card, which is a company that was dealing with online payments, I believe, in Indonesia. And while still doing that, Gojek. I think this is something that I remember on a visit that I made to Indonesia, probably in 2012 or 13, and in the midst of all the traffic jams in the various cities in Indonesia, there were these motorcycles, moving around, and somebody said, "This is our local company, Gojek," and it's wonderful to see the founder. And this company is now a leading company, and according to estimates, USD 10 billion company, and that's a fantastic achievement. So with that background, let's move to the interactive session. Again, thank you for joining us, Pak Nadim. I know it must be a very busy time in Indonesia. The current education, especially higher education, is certainly modeled after the Enlightenment Western European model. I think curriculum-wise, courses that we teach, disciplines that we have in universities are basically coming from that era in Western European experience, especially in the social sciences. Today is 2021, and certainly the experience of Western Europe in that period, in the last 300 years, is certainly something that is no longer with us, and yet our curriculum remains basically in that mold, right? And today's world, some call it a post-industrial society, some are calling it the dawn of a post-capitalist society. Futurists talk about us being in post-normal times, a time where the past is no longer there, but the future has also not really arrived in that sense. So it's a very complex and changing world. So in these new times, can we start by just getting your views on how do you see education in general today, and how do you see it moving forward in the future with this very, very different circumstance that we find ourselves? Please.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Mohammed. And first, I just want to say how much I appreciate. It's an honor to be invited to this forum. It's a very big question about how I feel about education. There's many, many things. I think that, first of all, I think it is fair to say that the way academic disciplines are taught and divided is a little outdated. I think this is safe to say that. I think a lot of people in academia already believe this, but sometimes struggle to create that change within a larger bureaucratic entity that is a university. First of all, I think the first biggest issue is the kind of the semi-arbitrary division of disciplines. I say this all the time every time I go to seminars or speeches, and I say that there is not a single job out there, profession, career, anything at all, that requires only one discipline. This just doesn't make sense anymore. When you have like the statistics that we got from Indonesia is 80% of graduates go on and do something completely different to the discipline that they studied. And we follow a very kind of European model whereby it's just like one major. We don't follow a liberal arts system traditionally, and you do that for 4 years undergraduate, and then you go get a job. And this just doesn't fit anymore. In any even jobs like medicine, let's take the most extreme end of where you need like a long-term, even jobs like medicine will require exposure to technology, will require exposure to statistics and mathematics, will require exposure to psychology and client handling, and will, for example, a lot of doctors, they are not as well versed in public health. That's just a small example. So even if you take the extreme example of a field that is very specific, very tangible, you need multidisciplines. So I do believe that like the US model of the liberal arts model is closer to where the future of higher education needs to be. But I would stretch it even further. I do think eventually what will happen, and we're trying to create this in Indonesia, is an unbundling of education. And unbundling means in two dimensions. The first unbundling is within and between majors and faculties. So that needs to be unbundled. All the arbitrary divisions need to be closed. We need to give maximum choice for students. The other unbundling is this division between academic work within the university walls and external off-campus activities, working in companies, working in research projects, social projects, whatever the entrepreneurship. So that's the second dimension that needs to be kind of, those walls need to be broken down very quickly. And so what we did was, instead of us kind of going the long way out in Indonesia, what we did was a pretty radical transformation. We basically did one simple thing with lots of different implications or ramifications. We gave the immutable right for undergraduates to take 3 semesters out of 8, right? 8 semesters is a full 4-year higher undergraduate education. 3 out of 8 semesters to be taken outside of their major, and 2 out of those 3 they can take out off campus. They can take off campus. And what we did was we basically created or curated a series of companies, research project, nonprofits at ministry level, and said that if you get accepted to these 1 semester courses, we give the students full credit. So effectively overnight, what we did was we made every single company, organization, world-class project outside of campus into a university for 6 months. Okay.
I mean, Pak Nadim, is this what you call the Campus Merdeka program?
Correct.
I believe in Indonesia?
Correct. Campus Merdeka is the kind of the master program, and there are many sub-programs that do this. So we've curated a program. So we've sent 50,000 students in a single year to do all of these off-campus projects, right? Next year we're going to send 150,000. So it's really about unbundling this concept of education, whereby it might take 20 years to transform every single university to become much more relevant to the industry. So why not combine them? Let's have a hybrid model whereby all the students are studying in university and out of university, in and out, and then they graduate in a much stronger position. And I believe that in the future, this will extend beyond that education age. I think there will be a world in which everyone is going in and out of educational institutions, and it will not be monopolized by campuses only. And I think that the universities that are most progressive, that will benefit from this change, are the ones that are actively already looking to do this internally. So it's a big change. It requires a paradigm shift. It requires a lot of diminishing of egos. Right? It requires some trust that traditionally has not been around between academia and industry. And I think that but it is the future. So we're trying to not just play catch up. We're trying to see, okay, where do we think all the developed countries are going to go to? And we're just going to go jump straight to that. Right? So that's kind of the philosophy.
Right. I mean, thank you. I mean, that's a great, beginning. And I want to keep to the higher education sector. I think we all agree, as you mentioned. I think even in universities in Malaysia, in globally, we agree that education can't be just about the classroom. And the days that maybe lecturers know everything is also has ended decades ago, right? But as mentioned by Tan Sri in his initial comments, yes, we need to produce, of course, the people who are going to be the future leaders in the country and to take up the different occupations. But the central aim of education is also to develop the human being. And in that sense, you mentioned something about working together between academia and industry. And I think, again, that's well taken. The only thing is, how do we also make sure that we work together, academia, industry, at the same time, the idea of humanizing society? I mean, making people not only, if I can use the term, I come from an economics background, not only creating that economic man or economic agent, but he's also a social being. He lives in society. So this working together of academia and industry, and for that matter, breaking down those disciplinary barriers, needs to be something that takes into consideration this human element in education. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think first it's important to point out that a huge chunk of those projects are not necessarily in industry. So our largest program is actually not in industry. The largest program we have is teaching. So the largest component of the off-campus activities are undergraduate students that are being sent to elementary schools and middle schools in the most remote regions in Indonesia, teaching numeracy and literacy to the most disadvantaged children, right? That have been falling even further behind because of the pandemic and remote learning, right? So that's the biggest program that we have there. There's another program that the Ministry of Social Affairs has launched, which are sending students all the way in various high poverty villages to basically create social entrepreneurship projects from scratch to finally go there, set aside and have a competing view from the ministry. Really innovative project that we help them facilitate, where they go in, they go assess what's happening, what's wrong, what is the government doing, what's the local government doing, and then try to come up with creative ideas, but essentially entrepreneurship, but social entrepreneurship, to alleviate the poverty in that local area, whether it's an agriculture project that they recommend, whether it is a health initiative that they think is the most important, whether it's a lending project that needs to happen. All of these things are part and parcel of this off-campus activity. So it is extremely hard to teach character as an academic discipline. I think a hybrid model of teaching character is always best, whereby you are, learning about values, but you're also putting those values to the test in the real world. So the practical components, the project-based element of character development is I think the one that is ignored the most. We seem to think that just by giving some courses or mandatory courses and key things that the government wants every student to understand, to either develop nationalism or morality and spirituality, they always assume that that's kind of, I've ticked the box and that's done. And that's just not the case. That's not how students behave. That's not how students learn. It's also not how students apply and therefore internalize those learnings. They got to go do that by doing things, projects. And so that's something I firmly believe in, that the path to character development, the path to a socially conscious human, the path to developing climate awareness is by going out and doing stuff for it. So I think it is not only an important component of character development, of the holistic humanizing aspect of leadership, it is the most important part. And these are not kids, yeah? These are 18 to 21-year-olds, or in graduate school, even older. These are adults. So I find it very, I think, strange that a lot of those things, they still have to learn those concepts instead of apply those concepts as a young adult within a safe environment that is still during their degree program. So I'll give you an example of what we're doing. We have mandatory, based on our laws, we have mandatory 4 subjects for higher education that they have to take. Right now, I don't know if Malaysia has the same. We have a religion, Pancasila, citizenship, and Bahasa Indonesia. Okay, these are kind of mandatory courses. Right now, most of the time, to be fair, they're just basically like no professor really wants to teach them. They're just mandatory courses. So it's kind of just like check the box. I'll get some teaching credit, students get the credit, and then they're done, right? So one of the things that we want to do to kind of enhance this is to be able to substitute that as a project-based team. So kids can go and build teams, and across these 4 subjects, build a project that encapsulates all those 4 elements across an extended period of time. And that's just an example of how we're making it real, and we're making it a stick, because then they apply it instead of just learn it.
Right. I mean, it's a wonderful idea, and the fact that you say that the majority of these projects are actually service based. Yeah? So you are basically asking undergraduate students or even graduate students to actually go and serve society, especially those who are probably the most vulnerable. Yeah? And that's how you instill this human element in maybe the curriculum. Wonderful thing. And I do believe, universities in Malaysia, and I'm sure maybe even in other countries, they do have community service getting more and more important as a part of curriculum. But I think in your case, we're talking also about the number of semesters that you are allowing this. So that's 3 out of 8. That's quite a huge, percentage of your time in university.
Oh yeah, the heads of the majors in the university are they have headaches trying to deal with this, right? Because imagine you are the head of a major program, and the government tells you that now your students have the right to take 3 out of 8 semesters outside. You are essentially forced to squeeze your mandatory courses into 5 semesters.
Right.
When you've spent years and decades perfecting this perfect combination of courses that you think a person who graduates with that degree really dreads. So it's not easy. It's not easy for the faculty, the leadership of the faculty to accept this, but it's absolutely necessary.
Right. Moving a little bit away, what you've done is you've disrupted the education system, the university. You've introduced something that has disrupted things. And
I prefer the term emancipate.
Emancipated,
than disrupt.
Liberated, right?
Yeah, no one's getting replaced, right? So I think it's just emancipated. I prefer that term, but thank you. Yes.
So we've had two other sources of emancipation in the last few decades. One has been the technological revolution with IT and ICT for the last 30 years. And the second, of course, has been COVID-19, something that unfortunately is not, it's not a very good source, but we've had to adapt, we've had to innovate, we've had to do things that probably if it wasn't for COVID, we wouldn't have done. Speaking as somebody who is teaching, online teaching, we would never have, done as much as we had done in the last year or two, if not for COVID-19. So there has been these sources of emancipation that have been pushing. How do you, and in that sense, education has also been seen as the great leveler. With an education, you are able to allow upward social mobility. And what we have seen with COVID-19, especially, and to a lesser extent maybe with the use of technology, is that the inequalities and iniquities have actually not leveled out. In some cases, you've actually had a widening of inequalities. And in that sense, it's very important in all our efforts to make this transformation that we have to make sure that the gaps get smaller rather than wider. And I think, this is something that we would love to hear from you. How do we ensure that whatever we are doing makes that gap get smaller, and education truly becomes a leveler in society? It makes the ones who are at the bottom have a better chance of moving up. What are your views on that, Pak Nadim?
Yeah, it's a very, very good question. I firmly believe that education is still the great leveler. I would say much more so than just technology in general. I firmly believe that. Because education is a type of technology, right? It essentially is a technology. It might not be a very updated technology, but it's a technology nevertheless. So there's a few things that you can do too. So for me, I would like to kind of stress the point that during the pandemic, it wasn't even a debate. It absolutely increased inequality everywhere in the world. It doesn't matter which country, and for a number of reasons. In the developing world, the technological gap of access to internet, speed of internet, cost of internet, all became massive bottlenecks in learning. We're looking at in poorer areas and in less developed regions, we're looking at, our studies show about 8 months of lost progress, which is huge in the education space. And, we don't know how quickly or if you can catch up on those kind of losses. So we're right now scrambling to figure out strategies on how to catch up and close the gap a little bit more. So the first thing is, yes, even though technology is still an important leveler, and therefore access to internet is an important component of this. We started the Digitalization School initiative this year, and we're going to really ramp up. This implies two things. One is, even though it's not under my ministry, but we are monitoring to ensure that access to internet continues to expand to many, many villages that still don't have it. The second thing is the distribution of laptops and Wi-Fi routers and all the equipment to actually use the internet, because a huge part of our schools have access to internet, but they have nothing to access it with. So that's where we're spending a lot of our resources doing. And then third is actually in building free to use applications. We're building apps for teachers, for principals, for school management, and really to automate a lot of the things that get in the way of them being able to focus on their kids. So that's the whole digitalization of schools initiative, which we believe is a leveler. But that's not enough, right? There's also philosophically, you have to take a position as a policymaker about how your budget should be distributed. And one of the things we did was we have direct transfer programs to school, direct transfer budget to school. And when we saw how it was calculated per student base, and the per student in a big city, mega city like Jakarta and an island in Papua was the same per student, that's when we realized this wasn't right. So for the first time, we changed the calculation and formula for the budget allocation to multiply it by a cost of living index. And now those islands in Maluku and Papua are receiving almost double the funding that they did before. And that is much more fair. So we always say keseragaman does not necessarily mean keadilan. Okay, so this is a very important concept that I think a lot of policymakers need to understand, that you do need affirmative policies. The other types of affirmative policies, and the most important of all, is not technology, is not money. There's one that's even more important than all. It's human capital. Okay. So the most important is, how do you create a system? This is what we're trying to figure out right now. An incentive structure for teachers to want to move or start their careers in the most challenged regions. Okay. So in terms of career development, in terms of financial incentives, we really need to create a robust system whereby you've got the steady stream of either new teachers or existing teachers or new principals to actually want to rotate out to these really challenging schools and create a career incentive to do that. So that is a very important thing that we are working on right now, because we're just coming out of the pandemic. So now mobility is a little bit much better than before. So that, in essence, is the great leveler between regions, is human capital. So the quality of a teacher, it doesn't matter. You can have a really bad curriculum. You can have really bad technology. You have a great teacher, that kid's going to learn. Okay.
We've seen, cases where teachers who are genuine teachers, with all the limitations of the environment, still making an impact. And I think this is what you're actually saying at the moment, right?
Yes. And I give one last example in higher education. So we have this massive scholarship program. And when I started in this job, we really assessed this scholarship program, and we felt that there was one problem with it, which is that the average amount so it pays below a certain economic level family, their student can apply for this program. So it's need-based, right? It's need-based. And this scholarship program fixed the scholarship at a certain number per month of tuition. And so we were wondering, why are all these scholars only getting into kind of not as good of the programs? And then we assumed for a long time that maybe it's just because, it's harder to get in when you're coming from not as good schools, you're coming from tough areas, that it's harder to get into top programs. But then we were like, wait a minute, this whole point that we're giving scholarships is to increase social mobility, right? But what's happening right now is a lot of these students are getting scholarships, they're graduating, and because of the size of our university system, et cetera, many of them are graduating and earning the same entry-level salary as a high school graduate. They're working at a cashier somewhere or in a mini mart store, right? And that's the same amount of it. So not only did they waste 4 years of their time, right, that they could have done working, two, the government wasted a lot of resource on that, and it didn't achieve our goal. Why are we paying for university unless it's a social mobility tool? This didn't make sense to me, right? So what we did was we did a tweak to the system. And we said that for prodigies that have higher accredited programs, we would keep increasing the amount so that universities would be blind to whether these are scholars or no. They just accepted. So what happened was something magical. The amount of students that got accepted this year to the top and more expensive programs increased by 20% in a year. So and those kids are going to go get much higher paying jobs, far better careers, great networks, right? So these are the little tweaks when you're thinking about policy. It's very, very important to think about what signals is your policy trying to send to the market. Are you basically forcing universities to take a loss by taking poorer kids? Then of course they will. They're natural actors. They will prevent those kids from getting in, right? But if you make it full scholarship and you give them a full market rate of scholarship, they are far more open to letting less privileged kids into their universities. And so it's a big wake-up call. And it's just these little tweaks, which I think the government first has to take a position. Are you going to be are you going to prioritize affirmative initiatives in your portfolio or no? Because at the end of the day, your PISA score is a function of the lowest common denominator. Okay, if you take Jakarta and Jakarta only could take a PISA score and compare it, Jakarta will be up there with some European cities. Okay, the reason why Indonesia has such a low PISA score is because of the bottom of the pyramid weighing that number down. So the extremes of the tail end. So it makes logical sense too from a macro perspective too to focus on your lowest performers.
I think, Nadim, you have raised a very, very big challenge. Higher education is also facing a problem of, people are not seeing a university degree as something that is beneficial. Why do I need to spend 4 years in a university and I come out and, there isn't a demand for me, and, even from a salary point of view, there may not be, as you mentioned, that much of a difference. And so this is a major challenge to many universities to actually think outside the box, which I think you have done incredibly well. Maybe just as a final follow-up to this, the one challenge, the biggest challenge that you faced in actually undertaking these big reforms, what would that be?
How many days do you have?
So it's just one.
Everything is a challenge. Mobilizing the tanker that is the ministry, one of the largest ministries in the country. We're the 4th largest educational system in the world. That's 300,000 schools and 60 million students. Just kind of let that number kind of sink in for a second.
Oh, wow.
So it's the challenge first is actually getting the tanker to move in the direction that you want it to move. Okay. But that's the easiest challenge, which is already super hard. The harder challenge is the political resistance that you get both internally and externally to change. The amount of inertia that it takes and the psychological fear of change of people that have been doing things the same way for decades it's very intimidating. And I totally understand that. I totally understand that it is a very intimidating kind of shift and transition to try to do things in a different way. I think a huge amount of challenge is trying to explain this changes to people. It's really difficult, unlike, kind of Ministry of maybe Health or Ministry of or Agriculture, where you've got sector specific. Everyone seems to think they are an expert in education. Everyone that's ever gone to school and everyone who has a kid thinks that they are an expert in education. And there is absolutely zero consensus on what they think should be done. So that is a massive challenge in the education space. Everyone has a stake in it. Everyone has an opinion in it, and very few people agree on it. And that is a massive communication challenge. It is a massive stakeholder management challenge. And I think it requires a huge amount of courage. I mean, the country, Indonesia, has been talking about letting go of its high stakes national exam for 20 years. We did it in 6 months when we came in. Okay. So when I ask, so everyone agrees, the whole ministry agrees, the whole nation agrees, this is the most discriminative test ever, right? That we're causing all the actually privileged people getting into the national schools, and the underprivileged kids have to pay tuition in private schools because they keep missing the test, right? And we knew this. So what happened? And I asked the team, why? We just did it, right? Okay, there was a few protests. I got a few phone calls from people that were unhappy with it for reasons that I'm still unclear of, right? But we did it. And the question, and when I asked them, my team said, well, before, no one actually had the kind of the courage to just go through with it and deal with the consequences, right? And a lot of it is like that in government. A lot of it is, I'm not from a political background, so I don't have the baggage of that. I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to purely focus on the kids, right? My number one stakeholder and their future, right? So for me, it's very clear, right? I just want to do what's best for them. And if I have to bump against many different types of interests, vested interests, then I will do so, because, but having said that, it's very important to be supported by your boss to do that, right? So the president is one of the most supportive. I mean, he put me here. That alone is an indication of how committed he is to kind of big transformative changes. I asked him when he offered me the job, my first response was, sir, are you sure? You know what my style is, you know what I generally do. I tend to bulldoze things to make change. And he's like, that's exactly why we need you. So you need to have a leader who believes, and then that gives me the space to actually create what I call constructive chaos. So yeah. So I think, yeah.
You need the political will, you need the people, and then you need the policies.
Yes.
And the ability to implement them. I think this is what.
But the people is the most important thing. The first thing that I did was I completely reshuffled the leadership, because I got lucky and I combined higher education with lower education in the beginning. So there was a reselection process anyway. That's exactly why anyway I asked for that to happen. So I also thought tactically, how do I get fresh talent into this? And so now we have 50% of the team, which are very experienced bureaucrats who are idealistic. And the other 50% are millennials who are running different inter-agency projects, inter-directorate projects. So we have half of the team that is millennial, half of the team that is very, very senior bureaucrats. And honestly, you need both. One without the other is extremely dangerous and could potentially be ineffective, right? So this is really combination. So the bureaucrats, the experts, they know the field, they know the risk profile, they know the history, they know the sensitivity to particular issues. So they know how things might react. They're great at projecting, at predicting, right? The young people, the millennials, are incredible at executing. Okay. That's a very overgeneralized way of seeing it. But if I had to point out at the key advantage of why those things are, because if everything is done by the experts, nothing will get done. If everything is done by the executors, then we will make a lot of big mistakes, right? So this balancing act between the two is extremely important. We've also built an entire technology team. We're the first ministry to build. All the ex-unicorn guys came and joined us. I have that additional advantage of having that reputation in the space. So a lot of people joined us to create these free to use apps, super apps for education. And so that's another big innovation thing. We brought an entire new technology culture that's now working with the bureaucrats, and they all affect each other's culture this way. I'll tell you, the first time I had a meeting with my millennial team and the bureaucrats, the first few times, I would say, the first month, the bureaucrats were flabbergasted. They were shocked to hear my special staff openly debating and telling me how stupid my idea was. The minister, right? I didn't realize this in my normal corporate life. These are the people that that's the reason I brought those people there to call me out on my mistakes, or maybe I'm missing an insight. But the bureaucrats were like, that is never, ever done with a minister. And they were so shocked. 4 months later, they're doing exactly the same thing to me. They've developed the confidence to actually say, no, sorry, Mr. Minister, you're wrong on this, and I'll tell you why. We tried to do it this way. It's like, okay, good. Because the cultures affect each other. And so I'm a huge believer in changing the culture at the top first, before you try to do anything else. Otherwise, it's going to be really tough.
That's a wonderful story about this. I think you really have nailed it. This changing of attitudes and culture, I think that's a major challenge that you must be facing, and I'm sure you're going to continue to face this in the future. We're coming to the last 15 minutes or so of the session. It's been 45 minutes already. ASEAN. Indonesia, of course, is a major player in ASEAN, and ASEAN itself, multi-ethnic, multi-religious, multicultural. Historically, this region has been known to be a region of trade. We've been, the middle of China and India, and of even the European powers. In this context, and based on some of those transformation that you're trying to do, what do you think Indonesia and ASEAN can offer the world in terms of education, especially one that has this humanizing agenda?
ASEAN, I think, has some very unique qualities. The first one is the ethnic and religious diversity of the region. It's really within such a small kind of geographic, well, not so small, but it's kind of a dense geographic area. Just the amount of diversity of culture, ethnicity, religion is so big that we could be a global role model in tolerance and diversity if we get our politics in order, right? It's always there's no natural inclination there's no natural inclination in humankind to fight between tribes unless there are political incentives to do that, right? And I feel like that's really what ASEAN needs to kind of take advantage of, our cultural diversity. The second thing is that we are in a very unique economic position that we haven't fully taken advantage of. Right. We are here, we are not China, we are not US, we're not exclusively working with China, we're not exclusively working with the US nor Europe. And I think that each and every one of the countries working alone may not have as much bargaining power if kind of ASEAN, negotiated as a bit more of a team, right? To make this work as a regional organization. But to do that, we've got to get the basics right first. We've got to think about what does ASEAN mean economically? We've got to think about what ASEAN means as a currency. We have to think what ASEAN means as a travel bubble. None of these things are I think, yet materializing. What is the concept of us as an entity? And I get it. Everyone's kind of got their own challenges. It's COVID and stuff, but I think this is an opportunity for us to lose, right? Because the opportunity is there. A huge amount of investment, huge amount of manufacturing, etc., is now looking to Southeast Asia. The Southeast Asian tech space has instantly become probably the most attractive emerging market outside of India. So India and Southeast Asia now is probably the most interesting, since China has had a lot of clamping down on a lot of that. It's kind of shifted now to India and Southeast Asia. So it's really, really vibrant as an economy, as a group of economies. And you know, Indonesia has been playing a big role in that technology revolution to kind of birth the unicorns, right? That are regional unicorns as well. So yeah, I think we're at really the very nascent beginning of this. But I would love to see an identity that is ASEAN. I think the first time we've seen some form of identity was when the ASEAN countries kind of rejected the attendance of some of a few members like Burma, Myanmar. That was the first kind of big symbolic act that the ASEAN leaders did to kind of say, we are a team, we have a set of ethics and code of conduct. So I do believe that's, you know, that could be used as a beginning of that evolution. Yeah, but I'm not very well versed. I've been participating in a few of the events, but I'm not the expert in this whole global political economy and ASEAN specifically. So I don't know, maybe someone who's more from a political science background would be able to give a better answer.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can't comment in general in terms of ASEAN's role in the future of education, but certainly in Islamic economics, in which I do have some experience. I have to tell you, Minister, that, you know, between Indonesia and Malaysia, in conferences that we have been attending for the last 10, 15 years, I can safely say that, you know, Indonesia and Malaysia, we do the most research. We publish papers, we attend conferences. It's Indonesia and Malaysia that are actually taking the lead. And certainly this is one area that I can confidently say that we are, you know, leading the way in the area of Islamic economics. And in that context, maybe one final question, which could be, a discussion in itself. Besides academics, administrators, participants from government agencies, we have also students with us, undergraduate and postgraduate students from various countries. These are the future leaders of and in the context of the IIUM, we have students from more than 100 countries over, all over. They have a great amanah to go back and, to contribute to their own countries and to implement these changes that you've been talking about, to transform societies, to make a difference, right? So what would be your advice to those, students who are maybe listening to us this morning, and what would you say to them?
Well, I think that as a student today, if you're negative about the situation today, I don't think you've really put it enough thought. I think it's the best time to be a young person ever.
Always better to be a student than to be an academic or somebody who's working.
It's the best time for young people ever. And the reason is, never before has humanity enabled so much economic opportunity that is based on your own passion. Okay? Because of the digital revolution, because of, what is soon going to become the Web 3.0 total revolution. We don't know when. Basically, everyone now can make money out of their passion and their hobby. And that's a really, really exciting concept. That is a big reason why you should never listen to your parents for career advice. You should always listen to your parents about values and learning how they got through all the challenges that they did. That is very, very important. And only parents can actually teach you that, right? Because they've gone through it. Do not listen to parents for career advice, right? This is it's generally a mistake. Because they don't understand the generational gap. They don't understand what the careers are, right?
No, but Nadim, the parents will want you to become doctors, lawyers, and engineers, right?
that's fine. But parents just don't realize that, easily a YouTuber could make way more money than a doctor, top-notch doctor, or that an esports kind of top-ranked player earns more than an Olympic athlete. So, these kind of things are just, I'm not making any normative judgments whether that's a good or bad thing. I'm just saying it is. It is what it is, right? So these kind of new jobs, new things. There are people completely making money independently now in crypto, and made way more than any lawyer would make in sometimes in a lifetime, right? So there is a huge amount of opportunity and change happening. So my advice to young people would be, one, take as much risk as early as possible. Okay? Take as much risk as early as possible. Risk is a necessary component of achievement in any field. Without taking risk, there is no progress, right? You will, there's no such thing as achievement, success, financial or otherwise, without taking risk. So view risk positively. Second, view failure positively, especially early failure, because that's where you learn the most. I barely learn from any of my successes, and I learn most from my failures. So if I knew that earlier when I was 18, 19, man, I'd have learned so much more, right? If I had known, I stumbled, I'm about to learn. This is so amazing. Okay. See, if I had that mindset when I was young, I would have loved to tell my younger self that. Then the third part, I already told you, don't listen to your parents for career advice. Follow your heart. The only way you're going to get better at something is if you really like what you're doing. Okay. This is simple physics. Okay. No one becomes the best at what they do and therefore becomes rewarded by the market doing something that they hate. Okay. This just doesn't happen. So don't fall into those traps. And I think the last one is build enough self-awareness that you are constantly challenging your own opinion. It is extremely important to not be too sure of anything. It's very important to be very confident about yourself and your ability to succeed. That's a very important kind of growth mindset that you can have to yourself. But it is very, very dangerous to believe in any specific concept, fact, opinion too much. Because what will happen is that as the facts change, you will not change. And that's how you get left behind, right? So very, very successful people are able to constantly redefine their opinions, their principles, sometimes even their principles, redefine their views of the world. And those are the kind of people who will be able to constantly find the opportunities. And the people who just think, no, I'm fixed. This is how I'm going to do it. All the way. Those people tend to get left behind. I would say those would be my key pieces of advice for young people.
Thank you very much, Pak Nadim. Really time is really always the main limiter of anything. We've had a wonderful 1 hour discussion on a topic that is really a very inspiring one, I think. We talked about the role of education. We discussed the transformation that is needed. In fact, I would even say we just touched the surface of this big topic. We talked about the role of education as the great leveler. We were introduced to some of the things that you are doing, and we wish you all the best. And we look forward to learning from what you have introduced, for us. We also talked about the idea of no longer disruption, emancipation, and the importance for us to use these sources of emancipation and to take the opportunity to implement those changes. I think we've said it a lot. This time of crisis, gives us the opportunity to make the changes, and probably this is what we have to do, and we need to do it. We also talked about the challenges, some of the challenges, and one of the main is the idea of mindsets, attitudes, complacency. This is a major challenge for anybody who wants to make a change. We talked about the potential of ASEAN and what ASEAN could offer, provided we got our politics right and we are able to have a correct basis of our education system, something that needs to be equitable, that needs to be something that gives priorities to areas that need to give priorities. I think this is something that I got from yours. And finally, your advice to the future leaders. If I can just go it again, no risk, no gain. This is a standard thing that we in economics say all the time. No risk, no gain, especially early on. Learn from your failures. So don't be scared to fail, and therefore that's an important part. Follow your heart. I think I agree 110% with this. We've had too many cases of people doing courses that they're not interested in, and then they just don't have that motivation in life. And finally, building the self-awareness, challenging yourself. And maybe I would just add one point which you said, the right value base which you get from your family and community, from your traditions and so on. I think this is where keeps you you are rooted in society that you need, but roots that enable you to adapt, to innovate. I think one of the things that we do find in some developing countries and maybe Muslim countries, we adopt. Sometimes we have the money, we buy, but we don't adapt and we don't innovate. And I think this is maybe something that we have to give more attention to. And certainly some of those things that you have informed us today, I think need to be taken up very, very seriously. We've had a very active chat, a lot of comments. I hope we'll be able to go through them. Thank you, Pak Nadim, for spending your hour with us this morning. On behalf of the organizers, I thank you. Thanks to the officers of the Higher Education Ministry in KL, our colleagues at AKEPT, the team from IIUM, and our colleagues in Jakarta. I was asked to make special thanks, to convey a special thanks to Prof. Eri Yulian Edesta, who used to be in the engineering kuliah in IIUM, and also to Dr. Heri Agong, an IIUM alumnus, for getting us in touch with you. So really, once again, thank you very much, Pak Nadim, for your time. And with that, I apologize for any shortcomings. Wallahu alam. I give the session back to Dr. Adli.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Prof. Aslam, and thank you to the Honorable Minister, Pak Nadim. So those who are with us, if you can switch on your cameras, we'll be taking a photo before we go for a break. Okay, everyone smile at the count of 1, 2, and 3. Next. And we would also like to acknowledge the presence of Professor Dr. Nasruddin Muhammad from AKEPT, who is with us today. And AKEPT has been a very valuable partner to IIUM, especially in advancing this agenda of humanizing leadership. Thank you, Prof. We will take a 10 minutes break and we will come back at 11 o'clock. So please grab your coffee, And we'll see you in another 10 minutes, inshallah.
Right. Assalamualaikum.
Thank you, Prof.
In the last 2 years, we have been trying to manage to change an university into a university that is truly international and sustainable. In this way, we are able to move as much as possible nature of education for the future by changing not only the structure of the university, but also the knowledge base as far as the university is concerned. In other words, IIUM is moving into a whole institutional transformation, taking with it the national education philosophy, sustainable development goals, United Nations 4 pillars of learning, and other very important foundation as far as the university is concerned.
Among the things we do to transform IUM as a sustainability institution was to rename some of the offices and centers to suit their functions to promote sustainability agenda such as responsible research, student development, community engagement, and knowledge for change. We also introduced holacratic leadership and management, where everyone in the campus is empowered and entrusted to carry out their sustainability initiatives.
Within a year, the impact of 29 flagship projects created could clearly be seen in 5 areas. First, the breaking down of academic administrative silos in a transformational way. 2, the building of voluntary teams and teamwork across the academic structure based on shared aspirations. 3, allowing for greater creativity and social innovation in translating SDGs into local context. 4, enhancing community engagement in co-problem solving based on SDG. And lastly, capturing data and information to be transformed into knowledge and wisdom.
The formal classroom education is now linked to our co-curricular activities, which give more meanings to our community engagement projects. Through learning to know, learning to do, learning to be, learning to live together, and learning to become.
I hope you have been able to see the gist of transformation that we are trying to do for the last 24 months using the whole institutional transformation and also carving a new idea of what a human university is all about as a kind of novelty for the future.
My name is Daniel bin Muhammad Yusof. I'm the project leader for To Lead for Peace, which is also known as capacity building for Islam, peace, and civilizational development. There are 5 important summary points that I can make. Number 1, which is we have engaged with vulnerable targeted communities such as the youth in relation to addressing the issues of extremism and radicalization. Number 2, we also facilitate research through nationally and internationally funded grants on these targeted communities. Number 3, we emphasize on collaboration between national and international organizations. Number 4, we have also played the role as expert consultants to the country. And finally, we are also developing a portal which is known as mycveguide.com. This refers to content development for education training as well as engagement with all of the stakeholders.
Being the winner of Sustainability Institution of the Year in 2020, indeed this is another attempt by the university to follow up what we have done last year so that it becomes a long-standing commitment for the university and at the same time demonstrate that sustainability is a doable project for the university, for the community and hopefully for the world at large.
Creating change for sustainability requires well-designed initiatives to make a real impact on the ground, and this is the reason behind the establishment of Sejahtera Center for Sustainability and Humanity. The center is pushing for change towards sustainability in 3 focus areas: making IUM a green campus, creating Sejahtera neighborhood through RCE Greater Gombak, and reorienting education for sustainable development. Within 2 years of its establishment, despite limited resources, the center had driven significant changes towards whole institution transformation in the curriculum, research agenda, student activism, and daily operation towards sustainability, sejahtera, spirituality, and the futures.
The impact is proven when IIUM has won 3 international recognition: RCE Greater Gombak, the Sustainability Institution of the Year 2020, 8 RCE Awards 2020. The whole institution transformation then led to whole community transformation, which the impact can be seen in 3 outcomes. More than 200 refugees benefited from the engagement. More than 2,000 students have enrolled in sustainable development courses. More than 1,000 poor households have received aid and support from the center.
To ensure that changes for sustainability are really creating impact on the ground, the center has adopted 3 strategies. 1. All the initiatives conducted are multidisciplinary and multi-stakeholders towards transdisciplinary solution. Secondly, non-conventional communication strategies, moving away from the formalities, excessive protocols and bureaucracy. Thirdly, adopting the approach of connecting the dots for sustainability, believing that one small sustainability good practice can create a ripple effect towards bigger sustainable impact. These achievements and impacts are impossible without the presence of strong teamwork, unity, and selflessness of small number of committed, passionate, and talented people.
Assalamualaikum, Dr. Faiza, how are you? Please unmute yourself, Doctor.
Alhamdulillah, thank you very much. I'm good, thank you.
We'll begin in 1 more minute, inshallah.
All right, sure.
I assume all of the speakers for the forum are also with us, Dr. Faiza?
I think Dr. John is here, Dr. Fah Kimbing is also here.
Tan Sri Zul, perhaps someone needs to remind him. Okay,
yeah.
Tan Sri is here.
Okay, Tan Sri is here.
Tan Sri is here, okay. Brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, so now we move on to the second session of this international webinar on humanizing leadership. Allow me to introduce your moderator for today, Associate Professor Dr. Faizah Idrus, is a faculty member of the Kuliah of Education. She has been teaching for more than 30 years, despite, she looking very young actually.
Thank you.
And she specializes in the areas of English language teaching, language identity and the community, language education, teacher education, and technology and language teaching. So this actually brings me back to what Pak Nadim mentioned just now, where he mentioned that teachers should have great impacts upon their students. And somehow this reminded me of Adele, when she mentioned about how the teacher who taught her English and dancing had a profound impact on her life. Sorry for that diversion, Dr. Faiza.
That's a good analogy.
And among her areas of interest include culture and society, cultural responsive teaching, cultural intelligence, English language teaching and learning. And she is currently leading indigenous intercultural dialogues and language activities. I pass on the floor to Dr. Faiza.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adli, for that very sweet introduction. Honorable Tan Sri Emeritus Professor Zulkifli Abdul Razak, our beloved Rector, eminent speakers, moderators, participants, listeners, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and Selamat Sejahtera. So this is our second session for today. And the forum one, and the theme is sustainability and inclusivity. And we have a specific topic that is how leaders should propagate sustainability and inclusivity in organizations for sustainable society. And we, with us today, we have three speakers. We have our very own Tan Sri, our rector. We have Dr. Fa Kim Beng, and we also have Dr. John Yip, who will be speaking to us and with us. And let me remind the speakers, they have only 20 minutes, and then we will move on to the next speakers. And at the end, should we have questions, and that's the time when we can actually come together and discuss based on the questions that are posed probably by the listeners. And before we begin with Tan Sri Rector, I have, although he does not need an introduction, I will have to read your little bio, Tan Sri. Bear with me.
Short one. A short one.
A very short one, but I was asked to complete everything that is here. Okay, Zulkifli Abdul Razak, or in short, Zul, is currently the rector of International Islamic University Malaysia, and he was the vice chancellor of University Science Malaysia from 2000 to 2011. He is the past president of the International Association of Universities, IAU, a UNESCO-affiliated organization based in Paris. He was the convener of the Regional Center for Expertise on Education for Sustainable Development based in USM, one of the 7 pioneering centers worldwide beginning 2005. Tan Sri Zul was awarded the prestigious 2017 Gilbert Medal by Universitas 21 in recognition of his long-term commitment to a sustainable approach to international higher education. He is a fellow of the Academy of Sciences Malaysia, the World Academy of Art and Sciences, and the World Academy of Islamic Management. Tan Sri Zul was an honorary professor at the University of Nottingham from 2014 until August 2020. He is a member of the advisory board of the Right Livelihood College Steering Committee based at University of Bonn, and an advisory board member, Institute of Sustainable Development and Learning at Leuphana University, Lüneburg. He was an invited speaker at the 2015 Nobel Dialogue in Sweden. In October 2020, he was appointed as a member of Qatar Foundation Higher Education Strategy Advisory Panel. Besides, Tan Sri is also a member of the UN Academic Network for Development Dialogue, World Islamic Economic Forum, and National Digital Economy and Fourth Industrial Revolution Council. In February 2021, he was invited to serve as an expert for the Futures of Higher Education project at UNESCO's Institute for Higher Education based in Caracas. Tan Sri was awarded the 2017 Tokoh Academic Negara, the National Academic Laureate, and recipient of number of honorary doctorate from various international universities. Locally, in October in 2018, he was conferred Professor Emeritus by USM, while in November 2019, University Science Islam Malaysia, USIM, conferred him an honorary doctorate of Da'wah and Islamic management in recognition of his efforts in widening the dimension of Da'wah through various research and leadership while serving at the university. In addition, the government of Japan, in recognition of his contribution of the academic collaboration and exchanges between the two nations, has conferred him the Order of the Rising Sun, Golden Race with Neck Ribbon in September 2019. Since 1995, Tan Sri writes weekly op-ed columns for Malaysia's daily, especially the New Straits Times. And Tan Sri, your question is, how essential is the inclusivity component in creating sustainable changes in higher education institutions? Tan Sri?
Thank you so much, Faiza, for that long-winded CV. I thought it was a short one. Fellow panelists, Dr. Kim Beng and Dr. John Yip, brothers and sisters, thanks so much for having me on this very important panel. I'm still reeling from the interview that we had with the Minister of Education, Culture, Research and Technology in Indonesia. But I am, in a way, feel a little bit also vindicated, because some of the things that he's saying is something that we are trying to do in this university, except that he has taken it on a global stand. In our world, we are still doing it at the institutional level, but yet the intention is the same. And therefore, this whole idea of humanizing leadership becomes an important, not only tagline, it's an important reminder of what university is all about moving forward. Yeah, I think, as you can see here, the notion of humanizing leadership is basically how to gather humanity in one go. And this is an agenda that I think it is important, underlined very much so by COVID-19, as I've mentioned earlier in my welcoming talk, that until and unless we can understand what humanity is all about, then I think we're going to live a difficult life under this pandemic coronavirus, as it were. We need to understand how we can live together as human beings. I think that's the first order of things. It doesn't matter who you are, where you are, what you are, as long as we understand we are human beings and we have the same sort of makeup, and therefore we need to look after each other to move forward in terms of survival. And therefore the tagline, humanizing leadership, is about all of us taking a role, being leaders, and understanding that where we should go together so that we are moving in one direction, in one unison, with one sort of mission, and that is about the survival of the human person and certainly the survival of the planet. It just sounds like a very ambitious agenda, but like it or not, if this is not happening, then I think we must as well forget about tomorrow, because tomorrow will never come. So why do we do this? And why do we do this? And I think it is partly because of we want to do what we call humanizing education in a university. In other words, education is just as what the minister said, we want to bring about the role of human person into what education is all about and make them understand who we are and what we are, and therefore the leadership role becomes important. More importantly, as we go through and ask why it is now being forced upon us, whether we like it or not. Previously, we have a choice. Now we do not have choice. If we don't do this, then I think all of us will be succumbed by the coronavirus, which is developing on its own. The variants that's coming on will be more critical. I just had my swab this morning because of some reason. Now they used to take the swab around the peripheral part of your throat and also your nostril. Now they have to go deeper because now the virus has gone in deeper, and there will be a time when the virus straight go into your lung. They no longer hide behind your nostrils or your throat. They go straight into your lung. Once it goes in straight into your lung, then there's very little that you can do. In other words, they are also changing at the same time. They are also fighting for their survival, and so we are. They fight about the survival. They don't differentiate who or what. In our case, we are still doing that, and I think that's the lacuna that we need to address. Yeah. More importantly, I think studies have shown why we talk about humanizing education is because of now there's research to show that leaders, yeah, are inundated by increasing perception of incompetence, greed, and frivolity at the expense of the governed, the taxed, and the managed. And this comes out in the HBR as late as 2012. And the reason they ask is why great leaders are in short supplies. Look around us, no matter who you are, where you are, you look around us, who are the great leaders now? I mean, we hardly can mention one name. And they are leading the world, and the world is in a mess. Now, what do you expect? If this kind of leadership takes control of everything else, who are we? We will be the one who are governed, taxed, and managed. Yeah? As far as the university is concerned, they'll be our student, our staff. They are the ones who are going to face all this, and what will be the future if this is a case in point. So we have no choice but to now change the idea of what the leadership is all about. It's not about economy. It's not about technology. I'm very grateful when the minister, Pak Nadim said, the leveler of society is education, not technology, not anything else. You don't have education, then you are not able to break out and be with other people. And therefore, what sort of education is a question that we need to ask. Is it the question that, becomes biased over a certain sector, or is it the education that about making people level in the sense of being human and so on and so forth, right? For that, given the time, I was told, Faiza, it's 30 minutes, not 20 minutes. Huh? I hope I'm right.
It's 30. Sorry about that. It's 30 minutes.
Okay, that's good. So I want just to go back to a very simple sort of idea so that we can remember. I normally use acronyms so that people will remember. At least after this talk, you remember the word wiser is good enough for me. You might want to forget everything else, but remember something that we can take home. Now, why wiser? Because we are Homo sapiens. Homo sapien, if you translate it, is called the wise one or the wise man. I don't want to use the word man. It sounds very, very gender biased. A wise one. In other words, we are wise. When we are wise means we have got wisdom. When we've got wisdom means we can make better decisions, not depending on just information and knowledge. There's a way of thinking of how we need to think beyond just what we've got. And that's what the Homo sapien is all about. We are not Homo economicus. We are not Homo, technologicus or whatever you want to call it. We are Homo sapiens in the sense that we are the wise one. And therefore, how else can we be wiser if it's not because of our humanity? We talk about AI, which is artificial intelligence, but within us, being Homo sapien, there's already what we call the primordial intelligence. We are already intelligent in the way we are developed, except that we don't use those intelligence. We are so dependent on intelligence outside. Yeah, we are so used to the user manual of technology, to work technology. We have our own user manual as a human being. But how many of us has read that user manual? How many of us has operationalized that user manual? How many of us know that there's also a user manual, us as a human person? And this is where I think the wiser part becomes in. And I just want to go very quickly because there's no time. W to me is about well-being. I think there's no other choice now when we talk about the COVID-19. Even before COVID-19, well-being is a big question. But because there's no death, because there's no suffering, because there's no lockdown, people just say, okay, we can put this aside. It doesn't matter. We can function without well-being. The world is in such a havoc. Well-being is all over the place, but we still don't care because people who run the world are comfortable with what they are doing. But now that's no longer the case. Everybody is suffering in the context of well-being. Doesn't matter how rich you are. At the end of the day, if you're not careful, the virus will get to you. Yeah, you may have all the sophistication of technology. Now you understand that technology is not even working. There's a lot of question on the vaccines now. When we talk about the booster dose, there are already evidence that the booster dose are not working, except that knowledge is not being shared. There are people who are still hoarding knowledge, and there's a lot of contention about whether this technology is worth what it's doing to us, or we are made to believe. So this is the whole question that we need to arrive at. How do you get well-being? And well-being is not just about accessories, about externalities, about wealth in the tangible form. It's also about the peace of mind. It's about the peace within you. You know, sometimes the poorest of the poor are more peaceful than the richest of the rich. And how do you justify that? Yeah, people like Gandhi say there's enough for everybody's need, but it is not enough for everybody's greed. And I think we are operating on the second level. Everybody wants everything, and that's not enough, and therefore people are deprived. Yeah, when you look at the statistics today, for example, the United States is well known now. It's living on the resources of 5 planets. The United States is living on resources of 5 planets. There's only 1 planet. And therefore, there are a lot of people around the world who are deprived of their own planet. Europe is living on the resources of 3 planets. And these 2 countries alone is living on the resource of 8 planets. We've got only 1 planet. Then how do you talk about well-being being an operational sort of things around the world, right? And therefore, you need to think about holistically. In other words, no longer Europe, no longer US, no longer China, no longer Asia, but everything else in one go. In other words, if you have got resources of 5 planets, you have taken 4 planets from somebody else. And it is not in the context of the holistic approach. You need to return this. Those are not yours. You need to return to the people who have the right to these 4 planets so that they can also have well-being. They can have this holistic understanding of us living in 1 planet. And therefore, we can have this level of society that we'll talk about. That is the operation. If you talk about everything today, it's about the whole thing. Whole institution approach, whole government approach, whole society approach, whole person approach is no longer divisional. And this again, what the Minister of Indonesia talk about when we talk about, everything must be in a transdisciplinary way, where we share things together so that the holism, the holistic approach becomes important, right? That's the first thing. Because only when we do this, then the word inclusivity means something. Only when you look at the thing holistically, then you talk about inclusiveness. You cannot talk about inclusiveness and still want to operate in a segmented way. Yeah, and this is where I think where the discussion breaks down. Everybody talk about being inclusive, but they want their own, and they don't want to share. You cannot do that. You cannot be inclusive if you do not want to share. If you do not want to give up what is not yours. Stolen things needs to be given back to the owner of them. And this includes corruption, this includes whatever else that you talked about, that you can justify it one way or another. It is no longer operational that way. You need to be inclusive to understand it from the holistic point of view. Then inclusiveness means something. And then it becomes sustainable, otherwise it is not. In other words, there's a number of things that you need to work on, the question of intangibility. It's not only the things that count, but the things that do not count. Emotions do not count. Ethics do not count. All these things needs to be taken into consideration before inclusiveness means something to you. You want to be inclusive, but you have no ethical grounds on it. You want to be inclusive, but you have no moral understanding about it. Then it cannot be inclusive. So the intangibility, the values that we talked about earlier with the minister is something which is very important. And that calls for some ingenuity. In other words, you don't insist on everything needs to be counted, and that's the only thing that counts. There are many other things. How do you work on the intangibles to make it part and parcel of the things that makes life work at the same time? So these are part and parcel of the whole thing. When you talk about inclusivity, it is not just inclusivity on its own, but without connecting the dots around it, right? As there's a question of sustainability, there's a question of sustainable. When you have this together in a parcel that I've described, then it becomes sustainable. It becomes sustainable in the sense that it will be carried on from generation to generation. And therefore, the definition of sustainability itself needs to be looked into. When you talk about sustainability, now the definition is about the present, not about compromising the future. What about the past? In the past, people have been living, at least in this part of the world, the tradition of the Bali subak system, for example, has been there for 1,000 years. And they've been sustainable for a long time. So sustainability is not the word that was brought in just 30 years ago, just because there's a Brunton report that comes from the United Nations. We have been living it. Yeah, Bhutan has been living it. Malaysia has got the word sejahtera, which also means sustainability. But the word sejahtera is not understood, it's hardly understood. And we talk about sejahtera, but our life is still not sustainable because we don't live the words and we don't understand what the word is all about. At the end of the day, it is about spirituality, because spirituality is the one that ascertains everybody is similar in this particular sense. When you talk about peacefulness, you're talking about within you that you must have peace before you could dispense peace to other people. You cannot dispense peace to other people if you do not know what peace is about. If you are very aggressive within you, then you cannot be the person that will be what we call responsible for peace. And this is where the role of spirituality comes in. Again, and intangible values that people do not bother because they cannot count it. And this is, I think, the issue that we need to grasp on. And the question of leadership, the leadership must also imbibe in the values of spirituality in whatever form. We're not dictating whether this should be an organized religion or whatever, but it is something that is within you, that we are spiritual being first before we are physical being. And then I think we begin to see, when we talk about the level of society, the question of equity, the question of justice, the question of fairness, the question of equality becomes a natural outcome of all this. It is not something that you target for, but it's a natural outcome of something that you do. It is very process-driven. You cannot get equity when everything else is not set up for it. You cannot talk about equity when there is no wholeness, when there's no well-being. Yeah? When they are not inclusive, all these things will have to come into picture, and equity, equality, fairness, and justice will be the outcome, quite natural from the process if you work it well. And last but not least, I think is the question of resilience. I think this is where we again found out in the context of what you call this COVID-19. Yeah, when we are locked down, or when individuals are locked down, we do not know what to do, because we are never taught to be resilient. We are never taught how to cope. We are never taught how to deal with our emotion, because the emotion is not important as far as the economics is concerned. Economics are talking about how much you can make, at what expense you don't really care. And this is, I think, the issue that you want to bring about as far as education is concerned. How do you educate the emotion at the same time? How do you make it good as far as being human is concerned? How do you understand other people? In other words, the value of sympathy becomes important. You cannot sympathize with other people around the world if you can't even sympathize with your neighbors. If the people are dying of hunger around you, and you want to talk about the world sort of politics or the world sort of problem that we are facing today, it will never work. So where do you learn this sympathy? Where do you learn how to empathize, which is even worse? In other words, you need to go there. You want to talk about poverty, you don't talk about poverty in a room which is air-conditioned, and read a book and think that you understand poverty. You need to go down and work with it. And these are the kind of leaders that we want, who will go to the ground and work with the people, understand what it's all about, and understand the real meaning of poverty rather than the textbook stuff, or rather than a video version of textbook. You really need to toil. And the leaders of yesterday, we used to see them there, but now you don't see these leaders anymore. They're jet setters here and there, wheeling and dealing, and make the money for themselves, and that money seldom trickle down. In fact, the money of the poor goes into their pocket instead. So these are issues that I think we need to come to grasp with when you talk about leadership. It changed the whole paradigm, and the wiser dimension is something that I think we should be thinking about, and it is something that the university is now trying to do. In fact, when you talk about sustainable development with the 17 goals, this university is working on an extra goal called spirituality. We want to recommend there'll be another goal, Sustainable Development Goal 18, which is about spirituality, which is about values, and which is about being human, and how do they actually work this so that everything else will be understood within that paradigm, rather than just within a small section of what leadership is being told to us today. So I think I just stop there so that we can have some time for question. But I really want to underline the discussion with the Minister of Indonesia. He has said something which is very, very profound, and I think he has related many things to what we are thinking about in this university when it's about humanizing education and hence humanizing leadership at the same time. Thank you very much, Faiza. Assalamualaikum and take care.
Thank you very much, Tan Sri. We have questions for you, but we are going to reserve it towards the end, as we are going to get all the speakers to present first. And we move on to our second speaker. Our second speaker is Dr. Fah Kim Beng, who is the founder, CEO of Strategic Pan-Indo-Pacific Arena. I will read a little bit about his biodata. He was an alumnus of the International Islamic University Malaysia in 1990 to 1994, before venturing abroad for his MA in International Peace Studies and MPhil in International Relations as Cambridge Commonwealth Scholar at University of Cambridge. In 1997 to 1998, he spent his time adapting to life as a Japanese scholar of the Ministry of Education, Science and Culture at University of Tokyo, giving him a glimpse of what makes Japan able to rise from the ashes of defeat in the Pacific War that ended in August 9, 1945. A time which Malaya also went through one of the hardest periods in its history. Between 1998 to 2001, he was based in the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Harvard University, where he was concurrently the senior writer of the Straits Times Singapore, as well as the head tutor in Harvard University, allowing him to test his strengths of all the education he received from the academic institution prior, especially the International Islamic University. With the grace of Allah, Dr. Fah Kim Beng was first given the hidayah to be a Muslim in August 1987. Instead of preaching, as many people choose to do, Dr. Fah Kim Beng studied Islam carefully first, only to use the next 34 years of his life to show his mother what exemplary Islam meant by taking care of her alone, yet conducting his consultancy and education business online. His mother, Maimunah binti Lim Bok Lim, was eventually given the hidayah at the age of 87 before returning to Rahmatullah 30 hours later in Kuala Lumpur, although both Dr. Fah Kim Beng and his mom were originally from Penang Island. He is now determined to help IIUM become a stellar and affordable world-class university based on working closely with renowned professors in East and West. So that is very, very impressive. So Dr. Fah, the stage is yours. You are muted, Dr. Fah.
Can everyone hear me right now?
Yes.
Well, first of all, I appreciate the very generous and kind introduction. And I would also like to express my gratitude for inviting me to my old university to give a talk. Let me time myself so that I can follow the Japanese way and end the talk right on time. Well, when it comes to leadership, I have since learned that there is no one single model or single person that can actually galvanize anyone or anything into success, regardless of how many KPIs that you can have, which are key performance indicator. You can have them as many as you want, but if you do not have a team that can gel together, then the likelihood of failure is actually higher than trying to lead it from the front, which is why Nelson Mandela believes that leadership can actually be done from the back, not unlike a shepherd. If you are a very skilled shepherd, you can actually knock the stick on the ground and be able to shepherd or guide the flock in a very organized manner forward without losing a single sheep at all. In fact, you don't even need a sheepdog in order to circle and maintain the formation of leading the flocks after they have grazed on the pastures in the grass in the forest. So that's the key to remember. Now, however, we live in a world where we are in a state of what some scholars would call false consciousness, because when you are driving alone, for instance, you might have the belief that you will not be lost because you always have the Waze or Google Map to fall on. So as you lean and latches more and more to those technological equipment, you are in a way lobotomizing your mind. Lobotomy is a word that I introduced to my niece's very own children at the age of 3 or 4, some 8 years ago. And I told them, I said, if you keep using your cell phone while we are having dinner, then the likelihood of your brain being unable to function normally, it's very, very high. So set your phone aside, not as an order, but because I'm saying this as an uncle that can actually guide and benefit you at some point in future. So that's the second element that we should be mindful of. The third element when it comes to humanizing leadership is that no one lives in a silo. You cannot humanize any leadership, not unless you have ventured to another country or to another institution. There is a Chinese saying that taking that 1 mile, walking that 1 mile is better than reading 10,000 books. There's a lot of wisdom embedded in that phrase or epigram, because when you start your journey of trying to understand how big or how dysfunctional the world might be, then you begin to reflect on both your strengths and your limitations. And when you start to have those dual process, what you can call lateral thinking, then at every stage, as you grow older and older, you are more likely to become wiser, as Professor Zulkifli said. Because one of the reasons why I ventured abroad after my first degree in International Islamic University was not because of the fun that one can have by going to another foreign country or the prestige of having another degree, but simply to understand one question and one question only. As a mu'alaf, and I do not dare to use the word Muslim lately, because when I look around the world, I see that Islam is there as a religion. There is Sirah, which is the biography of the Prophet. They are all beautiful. They are all complete. But what I cannot understand is, why do we have 57 Muslim countries that are dysfunctional out of about 200 countries in United Nations. So just imagine that 57 out of 200. What is wrong with us? We always try to excuse our misbehavior by saying that that is Islam and that is Muslim. But as early as the 1900s, the rector of Al-Azhar University, Sheikh Muhammad Dul, he once said, I come to Paris, I see Islam, but I do not see Muslims. I return to Cairo, I see Muslims, but no Islam. And this is exactly what I said to my Japanese brother-in-law, because about 2 months ago, my elder sister was stricken with a stroke. Alhamdulillah, she's recovering right now. She's able to stand and walk. And with the kind of support that she has been given both by the Japanese nurses and doctors, her recovery is accelerating. And when I spoke to her for the very first time, one of the things that my elder sister told me after she was stricken by a stroke was that she wanted to come back to Malaysia. So I told her, your wish will be granted. What I didn't realize was that during a pandemic, it's almost impossible to get anyone back to Malaysia, because first you need to get a medical doctor's permission. Secondly, the medical doctor would have to accompany you. And thirdly, you would have to maybe take 2 or 3 business class seats in order to make it comfortable for you and for the doctor to return. And the ambulance has to stay in wait at the airport in Kuala Lumpur. All that would take more than 120,000 or 130,000 ringgit easily. Based on my experience of taking care of my mother for 10 years, one stem cell treatment, just for a tiny vial, a vial as small as a finger, is 52,000 ringgit. Now, why would I want to spend 130,000 ringgit just to transport my elder sister home, when in fact I can give her stem cell treatment? The peculiarity of stem cell treatment is that it can only be used when you are not suffering from diabetes or any other comorbidity, as they put it. Given the fact that my sister has 1 or 2 comorbidity, therefore stem cell treatment is out of the issue. So now I come to the part where I ask her, are you sure you want to come back? Because coming back means you have to consider the possibility that mom is actually buried in a Muslim cemetery. And she said, yes. So I repeated the question again. Sis, are you sure you want to come back? Because we were originally born in a Buddhist family, because mom is in a Muslim cemetery. John would know my life very well because we grew up together as a kid. And the reason why I invited John to this panel is because of his sheer brilliance. He has been an all-A student. In fact, I take his lead rather than the other way around. The reason why Chinese school students tend to do well in various subjects is because we always look to our models, which in Chinese we call 模范生, and John was my model. The same applies to Muslims. You need a model to guide you to understand the Quran and life in general. You can choose Nabi Isa, you can choose Nabi Musa, but however, given the fact that you have been born in the Ummah, you have your own prophet, which is Nabi Muhammad. Now, so when I asked my sister whether she wants to come back, her answer was very granular and slow. Yes, I want to come back. When she said that, she gave me a huge headache because I just said, wish granted. And when I say something of that nature, I don't take my word back because I don't say things lightly. That is part of the training that I received from from Japan, more than from the United States. In Japan, if you cannot do certain things, do not say yes. In Japanese popular culture, we tend to see Japanese as people who are very subservient. When they go, hi, wakarimashita. The reverse is actually the truth. When they cannot do something, they will elongate their sound. When they cannot do something, for instance, they'll go, they refer to me as Kim-san. So, and you see that very bitter expression. And then they go, "Gomene, hontoni gomen. I'm very sorry." Or they do not reply to your email altogether, in which case you should not be offended because they know that there are things that they love to do for you, but there are things that the exogenous factors prevent them from helping you. So when I wrote 2 emails to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Malaysia, in Japan, asking if my friends who have risen to the level of diplomat can actually facilitate a process where my sister can come back in a military plane, I did not get a reply. I was not offended because this is a friendship that has been based on 30 years, and I understand their culture very well. When they do not reply, it means that they feel extremely shy, that they have risen to such high levels, yet they cannot help a sick patient to return to her own country. This brings me to the 4th issue, which is universal. For the life of me, I cannot understand, both as a political scientist or a consultant, why would there be such a word as malu apa bosku? It may seem incorrect for me to say this, and I may be recorded for saying it. But when you use such a phrase, why should I be ashamed? First of all, it doesn't sound grammatically right. Secondly, it's not aesthetically appealing. Thirdly, you are pushing all your responsibility to others. Why should I be ashamed? In other words, do you mean that I should explain to you what were the things that you have done wrong? So that reflects on the concept of what Sejarah Islam refers to as asabiyah. Now, asabiyah doesn't necessarily mean a bad word. It is in Sejarah, it is in the first chapter of Sejarah Islam when I was receiving my hidayah, because I became a Muslim or mu'alaf by way of reading. Asabiyah is considered tribal stubbornness in Sejarah Islam. But if you look into Asabiyah in the work of Ibn Khaldun, in Muqaddimah, Asabiyah actually means tribal solidarity. It means that you need to be united, function as a cohesive team. Otherwise, you stand the risk of being besieged, attacked, your women violated, your children enslaved, and your entire community wiped out. Now, we have all heard of the word Islamic State. Islamic State is one of those entities that function on extreme end of cohesion, which means that they will cover each other's back and go into the war to the degree that they are willing to kill and sacrifice their own lives in order to achieve their objective of showcasing the seeming injustice that have been done upon them. That is not leadership. Because in Islam, there is the concept of al-wasatiyah. You have to take the middle way. In Confucianism, it is referred to as zhongyong. It's very simple to understand. Even the Japanese understand it. Nakani. Take the middle road. So take the example of Prophet Muhammad, for instance. We all know that Islam come in the form of a very complete textual format, which is why we have the Quran. But we also know that Islam comes in the form of seerah or record or hadith. There was one occasion when the chroniclers of the hadith wanted to interview someone who may have heard of the enunciation or the articulation of the Prophet before. While he was approaching that person was doing gesticulating the camels come towards his direction. And this is what he did. The moment Al-Muslim saw that, he disqualified that person as a legitimate chronicler of the hadith instantly. Why? Because you have given me the benefit of the doubt that you are not as honest as what people may say. So coming back to the issue of the completeness or the perfection of Islam, which ties into the issue of spirituality that was mentioned by Professor Zulkifli Abdullah. Wide and deep as the oceans may be, according to the Quran, there is nothing in this world that can encapsulate all the wisdoms and the spirituality and the perfection of Islam, because God himself is already perfect. However, if we are in a constant state of rumination, what Muslims refer to as zikr, and zikr doesn't mean that you sit around doing, just counting the beats. Zikr can have a transcendental and transcultural process. For instance, the way I talk, the way I show my expression that we are actually going through a very painful time in the world, that is, in a sense, a form of zikr or ibadah. Why? Because statistically, it has been shown and this is very tragic. Out of the 70% suicide during the pandemic between 2020 to July 2021, and the statistics are coming from the Royal Police Commission in our own country. Out of that 70% of suicide, an exceptional 60% are Muslims. I don't really care whether they are Malay Muslims, Indian Muslims, or Chinese Muslims, but they are Muslims, 60%. And I've explained this to an Australian audience before. If Australia wants to help ASEAN, if Australia wants to provide development aid to the region, why not start at the stage of mental health? Because we simply do not have enough counselors and people who are very good at listening. We talk too much. In fact, I feel uncomfortable given 30 minutes to talk at this seminar, because I could use these 30 minutes to send texts and advice to students from all over the world who need my help on facing their examination or just relieving their stress. There has been a very close friend of mine who arranged all my mother's funeral when I called her, because this was my first Islamic funeral. But she showed up and she arranged everything immediately. Over the last 3 months, I haven't been able to reach her on the phone. And I do not know how to get in touch with her. I've tried to get in touch with 3 of her friends. 3 of her friends do not know where she is. Has she done something to herself? I do not know. Allahu Alam. So when Prof. Zulkifli Abdullah said that we need to cultivate spirituality, he's speaking the truth. Because people who get into the Ivory League, or in the case of IIU, the Gardens of Knowledge. They get in there because they have put in the sufficient effort to gain knowledge. In my case, when I applied to IIU, I got the necessary grades, but I was actually kicked out. Dear Mr. Park In Beng, we regret to inform you that we cannot accept you as a student of International Islamic University. I wasn't angry. So I typed a letter. Dear Madam Sir, you may not have known the process in which I go through to try to understand Islam. But I've been trying to study this religion on my own for 2.5 years secretly. And only my mom knows that I was studying Islam. Because had the rest of my family knew that I was studying Islam, as a Chinese, I would be considered someone at the borderline of being psychiatric. So I kept my faith for about 2.5 years. I received Hidayah after studying Sejarah Islam for 2 months. I understood what is Tawheed. I understood what is Jahiliyah. I could understand because, not because I was intelligent, but because the Hidayah was there as a cushion. And 3 years later, when I told my brother, who, by the way, was born in Singapore in 1962, and he was brought back to Malaysia as a baby. Neither my father or my mother understood the registration process, because it was during that turbulent time when one really does not know if the son should be registered in Singapore as a Malaysian, consistent with the nationality of the parents, or should the son be registered in Malaysia itself. Because of that one single confusion, my elder brother was issued a red identity card. A red identity card in Malaysia means that he can study in all the schools, but he cannot get a passport, travel anywhere, regardless of how brilliant he is. And he was very good with his hands. The moment he looked at a motorbike, somehow he has that ability to understand how to fix a bike from 75cc all the way to 1,500cc. He has that natural inborn talent, and also that sense of direction. He has been to, eventually he became a Singaporean, but he loved Malaysia more than he loves any country in this region. But ASEAN only gives any one person a visa of 1 month before you have to leave the country again. So for about 17 to 18 years, he was going in and out of the country just to check on my mom. If I'm not mistaken, I still have 6 minutes left. Am I right, Prof. Faiza?
Yes, you have about 5 minutes, Dr.
5 minutes. Okay.
Dr. Kim. Thank you.
One of the reasons why I like to speak in genuine biographical terms is because only through self-introspection, when you talk about your strength and your weaknesses, can you have a genuine conversation. It took me 1 year of suppressing the need to talk about suicide. But eventually I realized that I was not to be blamed, nor anyone in my family members, because the clinical depression was featureless. So to be a leader, we have to go back to the basic of what the Quran said. To save one life is equivalent to saving the entire humanity. It has been 34 years since I come back to International Islamic University. And one of the first things I said to Prof. Zulkifli Abdullah is, "Sir, I have read about how your father has escaped 2 bombings, atomic bombings in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, 3 days apart. And that exemplifies the omnipotence and the power of God. And I would like to tap into that spiritual Milky Way, if I can, to help more people, to help more students. And that's why I returned. And I didn't just return alone. I decided to bring my very, very, very good friend, Dr. John Yip, who has seen even more than I did, not just in Harvard, University of Tokyo, Cambridge, because ultimately I couldn't explain why were the 57 countries weak, other than the fact that we made ourselves weak. When we don't do things that are necessary to self-introspect on where we go wrong, then your mind is really the devil's playground. It's empty. And nothing is more fun to the devil than to have an empty playground in your mind. So on that note, I think I have conformed to the Japanese etiquette of keeping up to my time. And I thank you for having me and the many encouraging messages that I've been reading from the chat. May Allah Ta'ala bless all of you and your family. And if any one of you is in need of even 1 packet of rice, call me. I will make it happen. And I, in the name of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, will find a way to provide you with that packet of rice to make sure that you and your family can go through this pandemic. Not anyone else, but the grace of God. So on that note, I pass it to Prof. Faizal, and I beg your forgiveness if I had exceeded my time.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Kim. Thank you very much. Alhamdulillah. It's very touching with the vignettes that you have given us, and your vast experience on your own cultural encounters. And we will come back to you in a bit after Dr. John, and we will have again some questions for you to answer probably, and discussion of that. Let me move on to our third speaker, that is Dr. John Yip. Dr. John Yip is a senior investment banker, BMG Financial Group, Saudi Arabia. He is a career investment banker who has spent his 27 years intermediating capital flows from GCC countries with business and investment opportunities in the Asia-Pacific Rim. To date, John has helped corporations, sovereign wealth funds, and government entities in the GCC and Asia raise multi-billions in financing using Islamic finance modality. John is an alumni of the International Islamic University Malaysia, having graduated with a postgraduate diploma in Sharia law and Islamic banking. John holds a law degree from the National University of Singapore, a master's in finance from University of Hull, a doctorate in finance from University of Manchester, and an executive qualification in social media marketing from the Judge Cambridge Business School, in addition to being accredited as financial chartist and a digital marketeer. So John, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Faizal. So thank you very much, Kim Bing, for the very kind words. Certainly don't deserve that sort of compliment. And good morning, everyone, distinguished panelists. Very warm welcome. First of all, I'm very heartened by the presentation made by Professor Tan Sri, Rector. Spirituality certainly has an important role to play to bring us back to what I call this median, or what is called this balance equilibrium that all of us need to have as we meander through this pandemic. And what comes to mind is the issue of sustainability. If I may, perhaps I just share screen. I prepared something, which is I hope everyone can see. Can I just get a confirmation that everyone can see? Yeah, just get me a...
Very beautiful.
Okay. Can you just spare? Okay, so whenever we talk about the subject of sustainability, right, especially coming out of the recently concluded COP26 summit, now our default setting is always we will think about why and how we should preserve natural resources that the Mother Nature has given us. And we know that that's very important, because without which we as a human race, we cannot live on for millenniums to come. Now, in that thought process, I think we have, to me, I think it has overlooked an important facet. Resources that we exploit from our Mother Nature needs an intermediation, right? And that intermediation is the financial markets, right? And take, for example, agriculture produce. From farm to fork, right? The moment that we plant something on the ground and the moment that it's sort of harvest, from the time we harvest, we process and we get it to consumers so that they can eat. we need financial markets to intermediate. We need the financial market to provide capital. At the very beginning, we need financial market to provide pricing. We need financial markets to price logistics supply so that eventually the goods can reach our homes in a very efficient and cost-effective manner. Now, as with all resources that comes from Mother Nature, human beings, unfortunately, has this latent deviant character. Essentially, we live for the moment. We thrive in existentialism. So by that, we would exploit whatever benefits. We would sort of harness whatever that we can in the shortest time so that we ourselves or we as a person can benefit. Now that in itself, if we were to perpetuate this behavior and character, we would effectively doom our Mother Nature to basically destitution. Now, if history does repeat, we know that financial markets modus operandi rests on trust and confidence. In 2008, we saw a mad rush. We saw great fear. We saw despondency. And I remember vividly a caption by the then Secretary of Treasury, Hank Paulson, who himself was a banker. And he was telling President Bush that the entire human race today rests on trust, rests on confidence, and rests on faith. If all three of them are broken, which was the case in 2008, human race will cease to exist. And that sounds a bit dramatic. And we know that in the lead up to the Great Depression in 1929, the financial markets were essentially wrecked. There was no, how would I say, a smooth operation, just that it was back to the Wild West. It was cowboy town all over again. And that sort of led to a great suffering amongst people, lost their job. We have some semblance of high inflation. We have scarcity of resources, not because we couldn't produce, it's just as misallocated. And from there, it sort of gave rise to extremist politics. And then we had the Second World War, and the rest is history. So long and short is the role of financial market and the sustainability of which must be essentially looked at and protected, because without which our natural resources cannot be allocated and distributed to us effectively.
Dr. John, if I can interrupt, your slides are not moving. Are you using your slides?
Yeah. Let me see how I can do this. Not very good in that.
Yeah, put it at what you call slideshow mode.
Okay, which I am here.
This, yeah, you can push on the button right on the bottom. Yes, the screen. I think it should be okay now.
Yep. Can you see?
Not yet.
Yeah. Okay. So.
Yeah.
But it's not on the presentation mode.
Just bear with me. Maybe I just exit and see. Sorry about this.
No problem.
Okay, slideshow. Can you see?
No.
Not yet.
That's strange. Now?
We see
we can see your PowerPoint, but it's not on presentation mode. Not yet.
Oh, okay. This is a bit embarrassing.
It's okay. It's okay.
I'm not sure what happened. But can you see the slides?
We can see it. Maybe you want to just press next after that so that we can, yeah. So it doesn't have to be on presentation mode. It can be like this. It's all right.
Okay, fine. So which brings me to the topic that today in the financial market, inclusivity as much as we want is actually at odds with sustainability. Now, as the presentation progresses, you see why the sustainability of financial markets is under threat and how inclusivity as it stands right now, which is unbridled and uncontrolled, actually exacerbates the undermining of the sustainability. And we have a duty to save the financial markets. And I believe that educators will come to the forefront, essentially to infuse more thoughts, more empathy, and more knowledge as to how they should interact and use financial markets. The agenda, I have laid out 5 agenda. We talk about the default setting. So whenever we talk about the subject of sustainability, like I said, our mind will sort of go back to a default sort of like, you talk about environmental preservation. And I think it's larger than that, the topic. And we go down granular and we look from a bottom-up approach. What actually ails the financial market? And as you can see that the financial market is terribly misaligned now. And what are the causes to that misalignment? And what are the repercussions? And how do we bring that financial market back to the right path, rightful path, so that it can sustain and it can serve our human race? Now, whenever the subject matter of sustainability is mentioned, especially after the recently concluded COP26 summit, our default setting is always about, it's about how we preserve the environment, how we minimize or how we use natural resources deftly, which comes and invariably withdraws into, I would think, the 4 main topics: greenhouse gas emissions, global warming, deforestation, and decarbonization. And the entire precept of inclusivity is about to united we stand, and divided we fall. So therefore, is inclusivity in the context of preservation of environment is always about together, everyone achieves more. What ails the financial market? This is a very cheeky slide in the sense that the market's been pulled into too many directions. The 3 key drivers to the ailment, as I see it, is that, first of all, the market is virtually reality-based, bias. And the following slides will sort of like put that into context. Second of all, the market is overwhelmed by euphoria. And third of all, there's this thing about fear of missing out. If somebody gets in, I must get in. Somebody invests, I must invest. And that's overdriven by fear. Overdriven by greed. And that FOMO sense doesn't help when you have social media celebrity chipping in and fueling that madness. People like Elon Musk, who is very good in using social media to drum out the sort of emotions, and above all, and it basically takes away the rationality that we as human beings should apply. Seeing the unseen is about virtual reality. When I started off as a junior analyst, right, and the first lesson any boss will tell you is that you need to learn valuation, financial asset valuation, right? You need to know what's the worth of an asset because you got to deploy resources. Now, if you deploy resources inefficiently, there will be repercussion. It will come back to bite you, right? Now, I like to use 2 analogies or 2 examples, and both of it evolves around car. I think we are, as a nation, Malaysia and Malaysians, I think we all, very familiar with cars. We all own a car and we aspire to own cars, bigger, nicer cars. Now, if you look at Kasem, which is one of the 2 unicorns that Malaysia produced, Grab being the other, is that then you compare to some company like Tan Chong, which is a household name, that you will see how virtual reality-based valuation has actually overtaken, has actually erased all sense of rationality when it comes to evaluating the worth of a financial asset. Kasem, which was established in 2015, Kasem essentially is an old car dealer. Now, over the years, the owners have put on more bells and whistles and basically caught on the technology or internet game. So Kasem now has a platform, an app. If you want to buy a car, you want to sell a car, you go to Kasem. But you want to see the car physically, they have a yard. Now, in September 2021, Kasem raised $200 million, right? And the valuation that the market ascribed is $1.3 billion. Now, you wonder whether that's fair or whether that makes sense. You compare to Tan Chong, which is a household name. In my generation, probably Professor Tan Sri Rector, who probably can relate to that. There's this car called Nissan Sunny, which we are so enamored over, right? Enamored over. Now, Tan Chong was set up in 1957 to sell Datsun cars, and Datsun became Nissan. Now, Tan Chong has worked very hard from 1956. It is as old as Malaysia. Today, Tan Chong is valued at $195 million equivalent, which is 1/6 of Kasem. Tan Chong has an employee of 4,231. So Tan Chong pays or maintains the livelihood of these 4,000 employees. And Tan Chong is a very well set up business. Other than assembly, they have sales and services, they do plastic molding. So it's a very inclusive and comprehensive sort of automotive manufacturer / distributor. Now, FCF means free cash flows. For the last financial year, Tan Chong generates 150 million free cash flow. In the business today, free cash flow is very important for business because it basically provides an indication of how much cash the business can produce after paying off expenses, after paying off capital expenditure. It's akin to the extra money that you have in your pocket every month after receiving a salary and you deduct all the necessary expenses. How much money that you can use or how much money you can save. So free cash flow is extremely important. Sorry. Then we come to Tesla, which to me, it's another hyped up media game, right? Tesla was established in 2003 by this person called Elon Musk. And today, Tesla commands a valuation. It's one of the first $1 trillion company, which is amazing. With a market cap of 1.13 trillion means that Tesla can buy the entire GDP of Indonesia for 1 year with a change of 100 billion left. That shows you how humongous the market valuation the market has given to Tesla. Now, it doesn't mean that with that sort of lofty valuation, Tesla stands firmly on its feet. Tesla has an employee of 70,000, 71,000. The free cash flow that Tesla generates about 2.7 billion. Now, compare that to Daimler-Benz or Mercedes-Benz, which all of us are familiar with, which I believe all of us aspire at one point in time to own one of these. Daimler-Benz was established out of a merger in 1926. Now, Daimler's market cap is only 108 billion, which is about 10% of that of Tesla. And Daimler has 290,000 employees, 4 times that of Tesla. And Daimler generates 16 billion worth of free cash flow. You're talking about 5 times more. Now, the price, Daimler's share price is only about $90 euros, and Tesla today has crossed the $1,200 valuation per share. So that, to me, it's not putting in just more than fluff. It's actually whipping it up to heights that defies gravity. And to me, that seems a bit like virtual reality. It's cartoon. We have a market that's gripped by euphoria. We have this thing called Bitcoin. I'm sure all of you are familiar with, and you probably ask yourself what it is. Bitcoin arose out of protests 2008 when everyone lost confidence with the central banks. People lost confidence with the bankers. People essentially lost confidence with the regulations that governs the bank, right? Hence the term banksters was given. So from 2008 to now, Bitcoin has seen phenomenal growth or phenomenon, what you call gravity-defying moments. If you take 7 years ago, Bitcoin was trading about $600. Today, Bitcoin is trading about 57,500. Daily turnover is about $40 billion. Now, Bitcoin has no underlying assets backing. Bitcoin has no underlying value. It is what value that a buyer and seller attach to Bitcoin. It evaporates out of, it can evaporate just like that, snap of a finger. We have Tesla, as you can see the charts, is also going through the roof. From 10 years ago, Tesla was trading at about $6.55. Today, Tesla just closed yesterday at 1,137. So over the course of 10 years,